Snow was falling when the fire died. The storm had come early, tearing across the valley like a creature set loose from heaven's cage. By the time Ayanna reached the cabin, her hands were raw, her breath shallow, and the world behind her had vanished in a white blur of silence. She pushed the door open, stumbled inside, and sank to her knees beside the hearth where embers still glowed faintly. The wind howled through the cracks, and for a long time, she only stared into the dying light, too tired to move, too proud to cry. There had been a small village once, a place of songs and winter markets, laughter echoing through the pines. It was gone now, scattered like ash after the sickness took half the valley. Ayanna had stayed. Not because she was unafraid, but because she could not bear to leave the graves behind. She'd planted flowers by them last spring, red and yellow tulips that defied frost. They never should have bloomed, but they did. That was her secret rebellion against sorrow, beauty in impossible soil. For days she spoke to no one but the wind. She gathered wood, mended fences, cooked what little she had left. Sometimes she imagined the spirits of her ancestors in the smoke curling from her chimney, whispering old songs she half remembered. But tonight felt different. The storm was not merely cold, it was watchful. The world outside moaned with a sound that was not just wind, it was grief, or maybe warning. Then, faintly, a sound. Hoofbeats. Distant, hesitant, swallowed quickly by snow. She froze, heart thudding. Few travelers passed this way. None came willingly. She waited. The knocking came next, 3 sharp raps against the wooden door. Ayanna rose, slow and wary. She lifted the latch, and the wind burst in like a ghost. A man stood there, snow clinging to his coat, hat pulled low over his face. His horse, tied behind him, shivered under the weight of frost. He looked more shadow than man, more lost than living. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Didn't mean to intrude. Just needed shelter for the night." The lantern's light caught his eyes, gray, rimmed with exhaustion, carrying something heavier than fatigue. She stepped aside without a word. He entered, stamping snow from his boots. The cabin filled with the scent of wet leather and wind. He introduced himself only once, Elias. No surname, no story. He warmed his hands near the fire, shoulders sagging as though he had been carrying years instead of miles. Ayanna poured him broth from the pot simmering by the hearth. He drank it slowly, eyes lowered, as if afraid to be seen. Outside, the storm screamed louder. Inside, silence grew between them, thick but not unkind. She studied him quietly, the way his hands trembled when he lifted the cup, the faint scar along his jaw. A man who had fought something unseen and lost. "You came far," she said softly. He nodded. "Farther than I meant to. Running." He looked at her then, startled by her directness. A long pause. "Maybe. I keep leaving things behind, hoping one of them was the reason I couldn't rest. Turns out, it's just me." Ayanna smiled faintly, though her eyes remained distant. "The things we carry inside follow us longer than the ones we leave behind." He exhaled, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You sound like someone who knows." "I do," she said. The wind battered the door again. She placed a small log on the fire, and the light grew warmer. He watched her move, measured, deliberate, every gesture shaped by quiet endurance. There was no fragility in her softness, only strength learned through loss. When she finally sat across from him, her gaze softened. "You look like a man who's forgotten what warmth feels like." "I might have," he said, voice low. She reached for the tulips resting in a clay jar on the table. Their petals, still bright, looked out of place in the harsh cabin light. She held them gently, as though afraid they might dissolve. "These shouldn't live here," she said. "Too cold. Too late in the season." But they grew anyway. She extended them toward him. "Maybe you just need to remember that things can still bloom after winter." He stared at the flowers, unsure whether to take them. Her words, though soft, landed like thunder. Something in his face shifted, an old wound stirring. Slowly, he accepted them, his calloused hands brushing hers for a heartbeat that felt too long. "I'm not perfect," she whispered. "But I'll love you in a way that helps you heal." The fire popped, the light flared, and neither moved. Outside, the storm quieted, leaving only the whisper of snow against the windows. He set the flowers beside him, staring into the fire as if seeing something he'd buried years ago. "You don't even know me." She smiled, tired but certain. "I don't need to. Hurt looks the same on everyone." The room dimmed as the lantern sputtered. Ayanna leaned back, her voice barely more than breath. "Rest, cowboy. The night's long, but the dawn always finds its way." He closed his eyes, the sound of her words settling into him like warmth he'd forgotten existed. The wind fell silent at last. The cabin, small and trembling, felt suddenly vast. Ayanna watched him sleep, the tulips catching the faint light, red and yellow against the dark. She touched one petal with her finger, tracing its fragile edge. "Even winter," she murmured to the quiet room, "can't keep something alive from trying again." Then came a sound, not from the storm this time, but from the woods beyond. A distant crack, low and deliberate, like footsteps in the snow. Her head turned sharply toward the window. The fire flickered once, and the world outside went black. The scream of a horse split the dawn. Elias jolted awake, hand instinctively reaching for a gun he no longer carried. The fire was out, the cabin cold, the air thick with the metallic scent of fear. Ayanna was already at the door, her breath ghosting in the chill, eyes sharp as a hawk's. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed felt wrong. Too heavy, too expectant. Outside, the snow lay unbroken except for a single trail of prints leading toward the treeline. Elias grabbed his coat, stepping into the freezing light. His horse stood trembling, its reins torn loose, flanks streaked with a shallow cut. Wolves didn't do that. The marks were human. He exchanged a look with Ayanna, and in that quiet understanding, something deeper than fear took root, recognition. Danger had a face she'd known before. "They've come back," she said softly, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. "The ones who burned my village. The ones who took what they couldn't keep." Elias's jaw tightened. He'd heard stories of raids on native lands, of men chasing gold, land, and ghosts of power. He'd ridden with some of them once, long ago, when his heart was harder and his soul less awake. The memory hit him like a blow. "Ayanna," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "if it's who I think it is, I might have ridden with them once." She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then maybe you're here for a reason," she murmured. They spent the morning in silence. She gathered her things, a small pouch, a wool cloak, the tulips still bright against the dim light. He tended to the fire, though it offered little warmth. Every sound outside felt amplified, the groan of branches, the sigh of distant wind, the whisper of ghosts. When she finally spoke again, her voice was gentler. "Do you believe people can change, Elias?" He hesitated. "I've seen men swear they've changed, only to fall right back into the same dust." "And you?" He looked into the fire. "I don't know if I changed, or if I just got tired of running from the things I did." Her eyes softened, as though his honesty hurt and healed her at once. "Tiredness isn't guilt," she said. "It's the start of forgiveness." The sun climbed slowly, staining the snow gold. Hours passed before the first echo of hooves reached them. A faint drumming carried on the wind. Elias rose, his face carved with resolve. "They'll find this place by nightfall." Ayanna stood at the window, staring into the distance. "Then we leave before they do." He shook his head. "If I run again, I'll never stop. Maybe it's time I stay and finish what I started." She turned to him fully, green dress glowing faintly in the half-light. "You think redemption is found in fighting. I think it's found in mercy." Elias met her gaze. "And you think mercy will stop men like them?" "No," she said softly. "But love might." For a moment, silence again, thick, alive. Then she reached into the clay jar and pulled out one tulip. "Keep this," she said, pressing it into his hand. "It's not for luck. It's for remembering what's worth saving." He looked down at the fragile flower, its stem trembling against his rough palm. "You think I can still be saved?" "I think you already are," she whispered. By dusk, the sky had bruised to violet. The sound of hooves grew nearer, laughter carried on the wind, men approaching, drunk on cruelty. Elias loaded his rifle, hands steady now, purpose clear. Ayanna stood behind him, her face calm but pale. "You could leave," he said. "Take the back trail. You'd be safe." Her lips curved faintly. "And leave you to ghosts I didn't summon?" "No. Healing isn't walking away. It's standing beside what hurts until it doesn't anymore." The riders came into view, 3 figures silhouetted against the fading light. Elias's heart clenched. Faces from another life. One of them called his name, mocking, half laughing, half daring. Ayanna stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. "You don't have to fight them to prove who you are. Just don't become them." He met her eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, a vow, fragile but unbreakable. When the men reached the fence line, Elias raised his weapon, but instead of firing, he threw it into the snow. The gesture stunned them. They slowed, confusion flickering across their faces. Ayanna stepped forward, the wind catching her braid, her voice cutting through the cold. "There's nothing left for you here. Leave." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, perhaps because the world itself held its breath, they turned. Without a word, they rode off into the falling night. Elias sank to his knees, the air shuddering from his chest. Ayanna knelt beside him, her hand finding his. "You chose peace," she said. "That's how healing begins." He looked at her, eyes wet. "What if peace doesn't last?" She smiled faintly, her thumb brushing his cheek. "Then we make it again." The fire behind them flickered back to life, though neither had touched it. The tulip lay between them, petals trembling but unbroken. Outside, the wind shifted, gentler now, almost warm. Ayanna looked toward the dark horizon, sensing something unseen, something waiting. Her hand tightened around his. "It's not over," she whispered. "It never is." And far off, beneath the hum of the wind, a single gunshot echoed through the trees.